Throughout history, empires were founded with armies but survived on gold. Gold is not just a shiny metal. It is the embodiment of a state's sovereignty, independence, and will to survive even on the darkest day. But today in Moscow, that guarantee has been wiped out. Vladimir Putin is plundering Russia's so-called untouchable sacred treasure, the state's physical gold reserves, to extend his power for a few more months. This is not a routine budget balancing move. It is the economic suicide of a superpower. With oil revenues plummeting, UN reserves dwindling, and sanctions tightening the noose, Putin has broken the last and most dangerous taboo. But the greatest irony of this disaster is who is taking that gold. The state's most secret vault, that massive gold reserve kept as a rainy day fund, is now being transferred to the coffers of oligarchs and corrupt banks. To grasp the scale of this betrayal, we must first look at the cold language of the numbers, then at the crime scene these numbers conceal. Pre-war Russia was accumulating gold as a strategic doctrine. The goal was to be able to breathe even when cut off from the Western financial system. But today that lifeline is being cut. The data does not lie. Looking at data from the Russian Central Bank and Ministry of Finance, as well as leaked intelligence reports, we see a terrifying meltdown. On paper, Russia may still appear to have the world's fifth largest gold reserves, approximately 230 tons. But the devil is in the details, or rather in the liquid assets. At the start of the war, the National Wealth Fund, NWF, held 405 tons of gold, an immediately convertible war chest. By November 2025, this figure had plummeted to just 173 tons. That's a staggering 57% loss. More than half of it evaporated in just 3 years to finance burning tanks and exploding ammunition depots on the Ukrainian steppes. So who is this gold being sold to? This is where the darkest and most looting-smelling part of the story begins. Russia cannot sell its gold on global markets such as London, Zurich, or New York due to international sanctions, G7 embargoes. Therefore, this gold is not changing hands for an international value, but rather on the domestic market. The Kremlin is selling the physical gold bars in the state treasury to state banks under its control and to oligarchs behind the scenes. In the past, these transactions were merely accounting entries. The gold would transfer from one state institution to another, but remained physically stationary. Now, however, the situation has changed. The gold is physically leaving the vault. This is as much a sign of the regime's urgent need for cash fiat currency, i.e. the ruble, as it is a race by the elite to exchange their devaluing rubles for the state's real money, gold before the impending collapse. In a way, it's like the captain's cabin passengers boarding the lifeboats first as the ship sinks. Oligarchs and banks are securing their assets by purchasing the state's gold. This mechanism is a liquidity trap. Putin is giving away the country's most strategic asset to the elite group he created in order to close the budget deficit, pay soldiers' salaries, and cover the cost of ammunition purchased from Iran and North Korea. The projected budget deficit for 2025 has exceeded $48 billion. Oil revenues have plummeted by 27% due to price caps and falling global demand. Even the yuan reserves of friendly countries are running out. Only one thing remains: gold. And according to intelligence reports, Russia plans to sell another 230 tons of gold in the remainder of 2025 alone, adding another 115 tons to that amount in 2026 if it continues at this pace. The gold reserves of Russia's National Wealth Fund, its rainy day fund, will be completely depleted within the next few years. The sale of gold reserves is not just a matter of changing numbers in an Excel spreadsheet in Moscow. It is creating a massive wave of destruction in Russia's social and economic fabric that will take decades to repair. The first place this wave hits is the Russian people's sense of trust. Historically, gold has been the strongest anchor behind a currency, namely the ruble. The presence of gold in the central bank's vault gives the public confidence that even if our paper money becomes worthless, there is real value behind the state. Now that anchor is being torn from its chains, the sale of gold opens the floodgates for the ruble to fall freely. As reserves dwindle, the central bank's capacity to intervene in the event of a currency shock or a new wave of sanctions is crushed. For the Russian people, this means the return of hyperinflation and the dark, poverty-stricken days of the 1990s, while the state pumps worthless rubles into the market under the guise of a war economy. It is disposing of the gold reserves that would balance this money. This is in the truest sense of the word economic arson. Even more alarming is that this process functions as a wealth transfer mechanism. To whom is Putin selling the state's gold? To the people? No. While ordinary Russian citizens struggle with rising food prices and declining purchasing power, they do not have the means to buy the state's gold. This gold goes to oligarchs loyal to the regime, state bank managers, and the Kremlin's inner circle. This is the largest insider trading and looting operation modern history has seen. Seeing the regime heading for collapse, the elites are exchanging their devalued rubles and risky assets for the state's guaranteed gold. To protect his own seat, Putin is opening the country's treasury to these elite lutters in exchange for their loyalty. When the war ends or the regime collapses, while the Russian people are left with worthless paper, these oligarchs will be the winners with tons of gold, the real wealth that is valid everywhere in the world. This is a betrayal of Russia. Putin is not only giving away today, but also Russia's future to the oligarchs. The street-level reflection of this is chaos and deprivation. Gold reserves are a state's insurance. They are stored for use in earthquakes, famines, and major crises. Putin is cashing in this insurance to pay for the daily expenses of a war with no chance of winning, to distribute bonuses to soldiers to fund Iranian missiles. This is like canceling your home fire insurance and gambling with that money, and Russia's house is currently on fire. While the people are being lulled with tales of great Russia, the state's financial backbone is actually being broken. Reports from the region show that salaries are being delayed. Infrastructure investments have stopped, and basic services are faltering because the real money gold, is no longer being spent on the people, but on the war machine and the parasites feeding it. This situation is lighting the fuse for a social explosion. When the Russian people realize that under the guise of patriotism, their own pockets and their children's futures are being stolen, and that the state's gold is being transferred to the coffers of a handful of oligarchs, that silence will give way to great anger. When we take the issue out of Moscow's narrow streets and place it on the vast chessboard of global geopolitics, the deadly scale of Putin's mistake becomes clearer. Why does a country hold gold? Just for economic crisis? No, for a nuclear superpower, gold means sovereignty. Gold is the only guarantee of survival without dependence on the dollar, the euro, or the yuan. Looking at the global power balance today, what are Russia's strategic rivals and so-called allies doing? China has been conducting the largest gold purchase operation in its history over the past 18 months. It is filling its central bank vaults to the brim. Why? Because it wants to protect its financial independence in the event of a potential Taiwan crisis or conflict with the West. China is hoarding, strengthening itself and bolstering its reserves. The U.S., meanwhile, remains the undisputed financial leader of the world with its massive gold reserves of 8,033 tons. So what is Russia, which sees itself in this league of superpowers, doing? Selling, while its strategic rivals are arming themselves. Putin is dismantling and selling off Russia's financial armor piece by piece. This is geopolitical suicide. A Russia that has lost its gold reserves is no longer a superpower. At best, it is China's raw material warehouse. At worst, it is a bankrupt nuclear-armed giant failed state. Putin's dream of a multipolar world has actually gone with these gold sales because a state that cannot protect its own currency and reserves cannot be a global pole. With this move, Russia has completely surrendered its financial fate to external factors and in particular to China's mercy. Beijing sees Moscow's helplessness, Russia's melting down of its gold reserves and becoming cash-strapped is an unparalleled opportunity for China to reduce Russia to the status of a vassal state. More importantly, this situation strips Russia of all its strategic tools except nuclear deterrence. A superpower is deterrent not only with its missiles but also with its economy, reserves, and financial resilience. Putin is destroying this strategic depth which gives Russia its statehood for the sake of taking a village in Ukraine or advancing the front line by a kilometer. This picture reminds us of the collapse of Tsarist Russia in 1917 or the Soviet Union in 1990. As both empires collapsed, their treasuries were first emptied, their gold sold or looted. History is repeating itself. While Putin claims to have brought back Greater Russia, he is actually returning it to the most defenseless, fragile, and impoverished state history has ever seen. The transfer of Russia's strategic reserves into the pockets of oligarchs through internal sales is the clearest proof that the Kremlin is now run not with a state mind, but with a criminal organization mentality. A state can borrow to win a war, but a state does not plunder its own existential guarantee, its gold, to win a war. If it does, the war has already been lost, and the leadership is merely financing its own exit ticket. Gold, the legacy of thousands of years, the power of empires, and today a dream melting away in Vladimir Putin's hands. Every gram of gold that leaves Russia's state coffers is not just an economic loss. It is a piece torn from Russia's sovereignty. Putin is gambling away the national wealth, accumulated by generations, of the Russian people on a casino table to extend his own political life by a few months, perhaps a year. And at this table, the house always wins. But that house is no longer the Kremlin. While the oligarchs are taking their gold and making escape plans, there is only one reality left for the Russian people: a bankrupt state, a worthless currency, and a stolen future. The opening of those gold vaults in November 2025 is actually the moment the Kremlin raises the white flag. Because when a leader starts selling the family silver, the end of the road is in sight. The message is clear. Russia is bankrupt. It will just take time for them to announce it. So what are your thoughts on this? Please share your thoughts in the comments. To stay updated on new videos, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for choosing